Please remember to like, subscribe, and rate on your favorite podcast platform.
Trigger warning. This podcast contains discussion of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, and includes explicit language. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Right.
Our whole system, the old way of parenting, was to disempower children, not treat them as sovereign, mighty beings, and to objectify children. Right? That's why we discipline them. We discipline them in the name of the glory of parenting, but it's really disgusting subjugation. It's go to the timeout corner, or whipping our children, hitting our children, screaming at our children. That's why children are submissive. And that's why children fall prey. But when you raise an empowered child who goes, no, and you teach the child, even if it's your teacher, even if it's the principal, even if it's the priest, you get to speak up.
Without healing, traumatic experiences can have an enormous impact on defining who we are and who we will become.
Wade Robson and myself, James Safechuck, are both survivors of childhood abuse. In this podcast, we're talking with survivors, trauma specialists, and advocates,
highlighting the many resources available in order to inspire the brave steps to starting or continuing the healing journey.
This is From Trauma
to Triumph. What's up, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, From Trauma to Triumph, with myself, Wade Robson, and James Safechuck. Today, we are super excited to share with you our conversation with Dr. Shefali Tsabary. Some of you may already know who she is and therefore know how incredible she is, and some of you may not. And so for those of you who don't, let us tell you a little bit about her. So Dr. Shefali received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Columbia University, specializing in the integration of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy. She brings the best of both worlds together for her clients. She's an expert in family dynamics and personal development, teaching courses around the globe.
Oprah has endorsed Dr. Shefali's groundbreaking work in conscious parenting as revolutionary. Dr. Shefali has written 4 books, 3 of which are New York Times bestsellers, including her 2 landmark books, The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family. As an international speaker, Dr. Shefali spreads her message of conscious parenting and mindful living. She has a conscious coaching institute and a private practice where she helps families, couples, and individuals. Dr. Shefali is also a survivor of childhood sexual molestation.
In this conversation, we delve into the myriad of challenges that parents can face in raising children, as well as the particular challenges that survivors of abuse can encounter along that journey. So we hope that you all find this conversation as enlightening and insightful as we did. Please enjoy. Dr. Shefali, thank you again so much for being here. We just really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You know, I'll start with at least 2 of your incredible books, The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family, seem to be centered around this idea of becoming a conscious parent. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to just begin with asking you, what is a conscious parent? I know it's a big question. But...
It's a big question, and I don't have an elevator pitch, but if I did have one, it would be the revolutionary, epiphanic, non-traditional way of raising your children, where you understand that the raising is of your own inner self, and you are the one who has to parent yourself. And when you look at the parenting journey through the eyes of a conscious parent, it's never about fixing the child. It's always about healing the parent's inner child.
Huge. And yeah, it's definitely been my experience. I believe both of our experiences as far as becoming parents. And it just initiated an upheaval and an inward journey that I had no idea what was coming, but most powerful thing that's ever happened to me.
So I have a question. So survivors of childhood abuse can have particular fears when thinking about having kids, such as, will my child be abused? Or because I was abused, does that mean I might abuse my child? Can a survivor transcend these fears by applying your conscious parenting teachings before even becoming a parent?
I strongly believe that they can. I also survived childhood sexual molestation and was very scared when I had a daughter that this would happen to her, although, as we know, it can happen to any sex. Right. So how I worked on it and how I help people work on it, and to answer your question, is that there's always a risk of your child falling prey to unconsciousness in the world and to life's dangers, right? So, as a parent, it's not just that they'll be predated upon sexually, it's also that they could die, like literally, or somebody could abduct them, or just death. Like these children are vulnerable, and their vulnerability is terrifying as a parent, right? And you can't wait for them to be able to take care of themselves and get a phone. And so then you know that they're safe in the world. So there's a period, though, of every child's life where the parent is absolutely mortified. And then if you add on that we were traumatized in our own childhood, now our fears are like, we have barely felt safe in the world ourselves. And now we've brought in another vulnerable being. And now we have to communicate to them that the world is safe, but we don't believe that the world is safe. Right? We are suspicious now of every adult out there because we know the potential, right?
Right.
So the thing is that when you sign the contract to become a parent, you do give up your sanity and you do give up your capacity to be assured. It is not a risk-free zone. There is no assurance. There is no guarantee. And you will forever be cautious. Now, how do you stay cautious versus stay paranoid? What I'm trying to say is that there's inevitable risk in having a child. Like your heart will never belong to your body again, right? It will wander in your child's body forever. So there's that risk. And then there's our paranoia now that comes from being traumatized, right? To whatever degree we were traumatized. So how do we whittle down the paranoia to a healthy caution? Healthy caution is necessary. Paranoia is excessive. So, a lot of that comes from feeling safe in our bodies, trusting our intuition. You see, many victims of sexual abuse were never allowed to trust their bodies and trust what their body was saying and trust their voice. Their voice was overridden, their inner knowing. They knew that this is not good, but it felt good. But they knew that this was not good, but no one was listening to them, or no one was giving them language, or no one was saving them. So there's a disconnect in that adult survivor, and we have to heal that and come back to safety, come back to that self-trust again, and then come to caution. Then the paranoia reduces, and then you can come to a healthy caution. And then we teach our children to know their inner voice. I made sure at the age of 3 and 4, I remember practicing with my daughter how to kick a man's balls. I mean, sorry. I was like, if he comes here, and I showed her the territory, anywhere on from neck down to knees. I said, if any human being besides the 5 that I designated touch you here, you should kick, scream, bite, spit, hurt them. And I gave her the power. And she said, why would I hurt them? I said, because they are hurting you. Trust me, this is a no enter zone, right? So we empower them that this is not okay. Then we give them language, and we teach them, if they need to be aggressive, to not be afraid. And you see, most of us victims of sexual abuse are basically were at least indoctrinated to being very good children. And what that means is, we were obedient, we were kind, we were submissive,
Right.
and we were willing to be at another's mercy for
Right.
their pleasure,
Right.
and we gave up our power so that somebody else could be happy. Then we didn't tell anyone to not upset the other people. So we were the ultimate people pleasers. And that is the sign of what the predator looks for. The predator looks for the soft, compliant, submissive, sweet, good person, good kid. So you have to teach your kid to not be a good kid. You have to teach your kid to be a badass, know your power and be aggressive if you have to, and protect yourself. And you have to give them the language. I remember teaching my daughter to kick, and I said, this is where you kick. And she kept saying, but why are you teaching me this? I said, and it was so painful to teach her because I didn't want her to become paranoid. But
that would be my follow-up, is like, how do you not instill a paranoia or or a fear and teach them at the same time?
Right.
It's subtle, right?
Very subtle, and children are not subtle. Right. So the most important thing I think we can do is, if it doesn't feel good, you speak up. That's it. Children know when something is amiss. And I said, never keep a secret, never agree to keep a secret, never enter a pact with anyone to keep a secret. There are no secrets. And you will never do anything wrong. So you never have to be afraid to come tell me. And then we create that relationship with our children, that their feelings are the most important to us. We will trust them before we trust any other adult. We will never put another adult's feelings before their feelings. You see, all of us who are sexual survivors put ourselves way down, and we thought that was a good thing, and we allowed the adults to feel good in our lives. And that's the empowerment we need to give our children. No adult is more important than you. If you don't like your teacher, you can tell me. If your teacher says something to you that feels disrespectful, you can complain about it. You can talk, you can complain. You see, our whole system is to subjugate children. Our whole system, the old way of parenting, was to disempower children, not treat them as sovereign, mighty beings, and to objectify children. Right. That's why we discipline them. We discipline them in the name of the glory of parenting, but it's really disgusting subjugation. It's go to the timeout corner, or whipping our children, hitting our children, screaming at our children. That's why children are submissive. And that's why children fall prey. But when you raise an empowered child who goes no, and you teach the child, even if it's your teacher, even if it's the principal, even if it's the priest, even if it's, quote unquote, Michael Jackson, you get to speak up. But our children don't feel empowered to do that.
Well, just continuing on that point, I mean, it makes me think of, long held traditions of even seemingly innocuous teachings, like, that's your uncle, that's your elder, go kiss them, uncle. Go hug them, listen to what they say, you be quiet when they're speaking, or whatever. That just sort of power differential, right?
And then what we don't realize, that doesn't teach respect for the other only, it teaches disrespect for the self. So when the child says, I don't like that creepy uncle, I don't want to come out and say hello, we yell at the child. You learn respect.
Right. That you said the word a little bit ago, you said the word relationship with your child, and it made me think, some people have, like, after the movie came out and they come up to me and they go, how can I protect my child? What can I do? And it's a difficult question to answer. And so one thing I said is, one thing you can do is be close with your child, have an open dialogue with your child. And I would add to that, you were talking about having it feel safe for them to talk to you, right? So it's having this close bond with your kid. And I think when a lot of children are abused, this close bond with their parents is broken, right? Either the abuser comes in and becomes the parent. It's like that bond between the child and parent gets broken, and that allows the abuser to come in. So
100%, that container gets completely shattered.
Right.
And in early childhood, where children need protection, right? 0 to 12, right? They need protection. we cannot like let this container go to other adults who we
Right.
don't have under our surveillance
Right.
24/7, right? We need to trust these people. So when parents abdicate that power and give it to some other figure, mythical figure out there,
Right.
the great uncle, the grandfather, the godfather, or the celebrity, you have literally given your child as a prey and a pawn here to be used by the other. And how
Right.
can you give up your influence, right? These are your children, and
Right.
children need you to protect them and be with them 24/7. And but even having said that, like my sexual molestation happened under my mom's watch. She had no idea. And when I turned 12 or 13 and I had the courage to tell her, you didn't know that this ass was doing this to me, and she was, I had no idea. And I said, see, this is the problem. Like, you were not even clued in to my facial expressions, my tension the next day. And I don't want to blame anyone, but it could even happen right next door. It could happen with the bigger, older sibling.
You told your mom when you were 12 or 13?
Right. But
How did you do that?
I did. I told her, but I was really scared because it was a relative, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I was a good girl, but I never told anybody else except her. And then I told people later, and they really couldn't believe me, because I was nice to the person because they were part of the family. So I had to be nice. So they confuse, well, or you're well adjusted, you're fine. Yeah, because I have good coping skills, but that doesn't mean the trauma didn't happen, right? So believe your child,
Believe your child, yeah.
And also pay attention to the signals. And, sexuality has become so perverted in this culture that it's used as power. So, if you're going to become a parent, you have to educate yourself around the serious sexual danger that your boys and girls are going to be put into. You can't be naive to think that sexual frustration doesn't exist, that sexual predation. Oh, my grandfather, my father's amazing. I didn't leave my daughter with my father alone, even though I can guarantee you he's not a predator. But I was like, I don't know. I don't know what can happen to people around little children. He raised me when he was young. He's a grandfather when he's older. Sexual frustration is a real thing. And there's perversion because of our culture and the taboos, and we're not allowed to talk about it. Yeah. And then it's used as power, right? So it's got so many permutations that are dysfunctional that you can't be naive as a parent to go, oh, I didn't think that your older brother would do this. I'm like, okay, any male over the age of 12 can potentially be a predator, because there's such a thing as male sexuality, which needs to be contained, and female sexuality too. But typically it's the male who's the sexual predator, because their own sexuality is convoluted and messed up, right? Every abuser has been abused in some way. They didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, I'm going to really fuck up this person. They also suffer from trauma, and that's how it gets passed on.
Right. To expand on this idea of, everything you're just talking about and the need to protect our children, right? But then, as you mentioned before, that line between paranoia and healthy caution, obviously any parent can go through this, and survivors of abuse can have a particular version of going, oh my gosh, even once they have a kid, I have to do whatever I can to make sure that what happened to me or anything like what happened to me never happens to my child. So there can be obviously a good aspect to that, a good intention to want to keep your child safe. But then we can become maybe, too overprotective. And so just if you speak to, that line and what the impact can be of becoming possibly too overprotective, the impact on the child, the impact on your relationship with your child.
Yeah. With people who've been severely traumatized, it is really hard to come back to this centered, grounded place that the world is safe. Right. Yeah. So everyone looks like a potential.
Right.
I didn't even have a lot of harm done to me. It was molestation. I'm not minimizing it, and it wasn't consistent. It was once or maximum 4 or 5 times. But I developed a radar, right?
Mm.
And sometimes the radar was wrong because I put it on every guy out there.
Yeah.
So how do we imagine with severe trauma like you guys had, how do you come back to I should ask you, like, how did you come back to a healthy place where you began to discern and do a checklist, radar check, that not everybody falls into that. But, even if you didn't have trauma, I'm saying this over and over, every parent needs to have healthy caution.
Yeah.
And discernment and do a checklist, but maybe you can help me and tell me, how did you guys come to a safe place?
For me, definitely one of the hugest healing aspects of releasing myself from some of that deep fear was meditation, and still is. Just unwinding those old stresses and traumas from my physiology, so that I could be more and more capable to actually respond to what's actually happening in the present, rather than what happened to me 20 years ago or 30 years ago, So, that and therapy, I mean, just, really working through it all. So speaking to what you talk about, I mean, focusing on my journey, right? My healing, we just provided a new platform for me to actually respond to what's happening now,
And now you trust that you have a clearer radar and you can discern.
Yes. And I know that myself and my wife, Amanda, there's quite a different level of mindfulness and attention to our child that we know that neither of us experienced as children from our parents, who, did their best in a different generation, but a lot of ignorance and that sort of thing. So there's a knowingness that our awareness level is so much higher because of what we've been through, and that we've been working on it and processing through it. So there's a safety in there, and knowing that, we know we don't know everything about what our child is going through and thinking and feeling, but we know a lot more than our parents ever did about us, so there's some safety in that. And
I still have, like, my wife had a pretty good childhood. Like, she went, specifically, she would go away to camps for like 4 weeks or whatever, right? She has these great memories of these camps. And I'm like, our children are not going away for 4 weeks unsupervised. For me, that's like super, just, I'm like, there's no way I can do that. Right. And so I struggle with, like, man, am I hindering these great childhood experiences that they can have, that my wife remembers, by being overprotective? So in that instance, I can't say yes to that, or I haven't, at least yet.
What about relatives or going for a sleepover, right? That's hard too.
It is hard.
How do you send your kid for a sleepover?
They're doing, yes, I know. I'm dealing with that right now. It is a struggle. It is a struggle. I talk with my wife, and I just try to communicate to her, look, I'm having a really hard time. I try to be open and vocal about it, and let it out. And then I try to have a nice open dialogue with my children, so that they know, I try to keep close with them. And so, after I check in with them, and just to give them the opportunity to say something. And I'm not saying that, like, I don't want, friends to hear this and say, like, James distrusts them. So, it's a fine line, but, I hope people just understand that it is triggering for me. Anytime my child is away from me and I'm not able to see them, and they're under the care of some other adult, it's very triggering. And so I have to just process that. And a lot of therapy and meditation, and years of, like, self-reflecting, things. When you talk about the book, it's like, when something happens, you go inward and you say, why am I reacting this way? Okay, what's going on here with me? Right. And what is this child doing that is causing these kinds of reactions? Oh, it's years of that, like, right, sort of processing how you're reacting internally, and then talking with your therapist about it and saying, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what's going on here? And then, a lot of work.
Yeah. Same thing. Our son has never slept over anywhere except my wife's mother's place by himself. He's 11, so that's there for sure.
Yeah, you're definitely behind the curve, right? And that's okay. It's also honoring your own level of capacity. And then you slowly edge into the growth, right? You slowly lean into the growth. I had a very dear friend who did not allow her children to sleep over, and my house was the first one, and they were like 12 and 13. And she's like, you make sure they're okay. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're 12 and they're taller than me. But mine was the first house because she only felt safe with me. So we have to have compassion, but also slowly trust our children. By 12, by 13, they should be able to empower themselves and say no. And we have to trust that, and we have to give them that trust,
It's tough. Yeah. It's really tough. I'm struggling with it every time they're out of my sight. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, that's definitely the question and the concern is not wanting to stifle wanting to keep them safe, but not wanting to stifle their experiences, their growth,
Do you think that by 11 or 12, you can have a straight talk with them more and more that, hey, people out there could do this, so I'm going to let you go, but you have to promise me that you don't fall under the spell. Like, you understand it's a manipulation, there's a grooming, there's a whole process that you could fall into. And if you show me that you're badass and brave to stand up against it, then I will loosen the rein a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And definitely, even as as the documentary film Leaving Neverland was coming out a few years ago, and my son was 8 or 9 at the time. And, we had concerns about, all right, what's going to happen to him at school when this public thing comes out? And, kids can be unintentionally very, nasty with things they say. So that definitely opened it up to, a new level of dialogue with our son, and explaining more deeply what happened to me and what this film is about and how that relates to him. And so, yeah, there continues to be new opportunities to expand that conversation.
Well, y'all are doing such a beautiful thing by alchemizing your trauma into service. And that's the best use of trauma, right? To help others who get relief when they listen to this. And so I'm so proud of you both, and I applaud you both greatly. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a privilege,
So survivors of childhood trauma can develop reactions that help you survive as a young child, right? Or a young adult. And these behaviors that were useful as a child, but when you become older, these behaviors are no longer useful to you. And so how does one recognize these behaviors, these old behaviors as they come out? And then how does one then transcend them or deal with them?
Right. So this is the development of these masks we wore, which we call the ego, helped us in childhood, but now they're like totally screwing us up. So, and then they come out unbidingly, like we didn't bid them, we didn't intentionally ask them to come, and then they just show up unwittingly, and we vomit them on our children. So, if we are conscious seekers and aware, we can then go, oh my God, I just vomited, I had an attack on my kid. Let me go deconstruct that. And you will then whittle away at the reaction and come to the core, and the core will be a fear. At that moment, I was stricken by a vision of the future, which was fear-based, or vision from the past, which was fear-based. It's typically nothing in the present that is so bad that we need to scream at our children and scream bloody murder. It's always a vision of the future or a vision from the past. And in the present moment, nothing is really bad happening. As long as we're breathing, nothing is so terrible. But it is our projection from the past or the future that we put on the present moment and then lose our shit, right? So it's an opportunity, without guilt or shaming ourselves, to go, okay, who the F was that? Like, where did that ego come from and why? And then you begin to realize it's because I'm terrified that, the same part in me exists in my kid, or I see the same vulnerability and I want to stampede it out. I want to stampede this part of me that I don't like in my kid out, so that I can make sure my kid doesn't go through what I went through.
Right.
And all sorts of fear that are paranoid based, lack based, future based, past based come from ego. So then we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is a healthier response in the moment? It could be something like, I don't like what you're doing right now, but let's work on it together. Versus this is doomsday, right? It's a prophecy of catastrophic proportions and I have to fix it now, right? So that energy of like, this is catastrophic, this is chronic, and I have to fix this right now is all ego. And parents have it, whether they're sexual survivors or every parent has this reaction,
Right.
And then, so upon, let's say that sort of thing happening, a trigger comes, we unfortunately kind of vomit that fear and that old survival tactic onto our child. Then we have that moment of realization. We do that work. We go in and locate the source and the fear. Then how do you feel about, I guess it's depending upon the age of the child, but how do you feel about communicating to the child what happened? Why dad or mom exploded? Yeah.
Right. And parents often ask me that, how much should we tell them about the reasons why? And I often say, and this may sound a little crass, but I often say your kids don't need to know the reason why. They just need to know that you're going to take accountability, take the shame and blame and guilt off them, take it back on your own shoulders, and go change, go actually do the work. They don't want to even hear you're sorry, because most of our, apologies are empty. They just want to see you go heal. So if you go to your kid and go, you just saw me act batshit crazy, and I have a lot of issues, have you seen your grandparents? I have a lot of issues and I'm going to lose my shit a lot because I came from a lot of pain. And every time you see me act like a lunatic, do not take it personally. It's not you, it's me going through my pain. And you, when you talk to your kids like that, they get it because they are thinking that we are batshit crazy too.
Right.
So that they're just relieved that you've taken the shame. And what kills us is shame, blame, guilt. That's what kills us. So they don't care. You can act crazy. Just don't blame them. Like, don't make them feel bad about it. Just go, I'm a lunatic right now and I need to yell and scream. They will just continue whistling through their tasks. They don't care, So that's health, right? It's not that we have to be perfect, but we have to take accountability. So if we can, preamble the yelling with, okay, I'm going to lose my shit right now because I don't have control because of my childhood issues. So just bear with me, everyone. And then you do your rant. That's very beautiful and healthy versus blaming the kid, shaming the kid, and pretending as if the kid is at fault. And that is what all unconscious parenting does to our children. Parents take no accountability for losing their shit. They actually think they're justified.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then they find justifications. Right.
Right.
I think what else is interesting is letting your kids see you, like, you don't have to be perfect, right? And them thinking that you're supposed to be perfect is probably not healthy for them as well. But like vocalizing, look, it doesn't need to be yelling at them. It could be anything, but like showing them, like, I'm struggling with something myself. Like I'm not sure what to do here. And they watch you work through something. And I think it makes them feel it's okay when they don't get something right away, right? It lets them watch you go through it and hopefully go through it in a healthy way. And so I've been trying to do that.
Yeah, so it's so beautiful.
I've been trying to do it with my kids. If I'm having trouble with something or I'm struggling with something, it's like I try to vocalize it to them. Yeah, I'm really, that was a struggle today. And what struggle did I go through? And then I'm going to work through it and just kind of let them watch me work through it in a hopefully they'll view it in a healthy way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of kind of early on in my explicit healing journey with the therapist that I first disclosed the abuse to. I was in, what I call the middle of a crisis sort of breakdown experience and just lots of depression and anxiety. And my son was somewhere in the age of around 2.5. And I remember coming into therapy and saying, like, like, I'm just in such a state. I'm so sad and I'm so fearful, and I don't want my son to see me like this. And, and my therapist listened very intently and let me say whatever I needed to say. And then he said, okay, well, let me ask you a question. Do you not want your son to know that things aren't perfect in life? That sometimes we get sad and sometimes we get scared and sometimes we get angry. Like, these are important things for him to know, and that it's okay if it's okay for dad to feel that way. And then maybe it's okay for him to feel that way. And that's always stayed with me,
Yeah, I think unprocessed emotions are so dangerous. And processing emotions is so normal and powerful. Your kid doesn't want to see you passed out drunk on the couch because that's unprocessed grief and unprocessed depression and unprocessed rage.
Right.
Crying is such a relief. Of course, processed crying, right? You don't want to be like using them as your therapist, but when it's contained with language and articulate and understood as a moment in time, that is such a gift to give your children, that we're not extra super terrestrial. We're human beings, and humans can be messed up at sometimes.
Right. I'm thinking about worth. And of course, again, all humans deal with this no matter their experience, or most. Survivors can tend to have deep feelings of unworthiness and self-hate. And I'm curious, once we endeavor to begin this journey of becoming more conscious, right, of our negative patterns, and then maybe beginning to see how we tend to repeat those patterns, it could be very easy for some to kind of get blocked there once kind of unearthing all of that, and take that and kind of turn that back on ourselves and kind of escalate our self-hate, like, oh gosh, look how horrible you are, and look at what you're repeating. And so wondering how does one not get blocked there and escalate the self-hate and move on to the next stage of processing and healing?
Yeah, I think all processing involves progress and regress. So you're talking about, we make a little progress and then we go into regression, because worth is not our destiny, right? We've never had it reflected to us. So every time we progress into worth, we will regress. That's why people who lose weight and are on a health kick, they go put it back on. Why people go to rehab and then go and, have a, what is it called?
Relapse.
Right. So it's so common. And the reason why is because worth is not our destiny. We do not believe it's our right. So every time we touch worth, we run away from it and sabotage, great sabotage. And we have to understand this little bit of a pendulum process, have a coach that holds us through it, a therapist. And then eventually we'll steady out once we see, damn, I sabotage myself again, right? This is the cyclical nature of evolution. It's not a straight line. You keep going back, and then you start again, hit rock bottom, start again, and then go back, hit rock bottom, start again. And if you do that knowingly, like, I was doing so good, and then look at me, or you become even better. You watch yourself walk into the sabotage. You're like, I can't handle this. This is too much help. I need to go fuck it up a little bit, right? But once you become aware that this is the nature of growth, you don't shame yourself or loathe yourself even more. You're like, I'm in a regression. Hello, I'm in a regression, right? There's no need to have shame about it. It is the nature of growth. So, people who relapse have a lot of guilt and shame and don't want to tell people, but I expect in my coaching practice, in my therapy practice, for people, no matter how cleaned up they look or how ready they are, it's going to take 12, 13 cycles before they come out of the constant tornado of unworthiness. It doesn't happen in one moment. It takes a lot of trials and errors to get there.
And that, it makes me think of, change is difficult, especially when you have these behaviors from childhood. when you start to change, and even if these are healthy changes, it feels so uncomfortable. And sometimes, like even now where I'm dealing with a situation and I'm dealing with it differently, it's hard to discern, like that I dealt with that better. It just doesn't feel better yet because it's so fresh. It's so new. And it's so I'll second guess myself and be like, yeah, I think that was a much healthier way to do it. It just doesn't feel that way yet. It doesn't always feel good.
No. It's like if you've had a relationship where you get things only by arguing, and then you're in a new relationship and you get whatever you needed or wanted right away, you're like, huh? This is not a loving relationship. I'm out. Because you believe you have to fight or scream to be heard, right? Or you feel like, almost as if it's so anomalous and foreign to you that is bad. And then you shun that and go back to the old pattern just because it was more familiar, right?
Right. And it's just, it can't be expressed enough how ingrained those behaviors are, or how natural they end up feeling, whatever pathways your brain is like wired in.
100%, right? It's like that foundational blueprint doesn't get erased. It gets more and more entrenched, and new patterns take so long to groove themselves in your neuro-linguistic temperamental network. And but that's what evolution is, if we can look at non-human animals, how long that chameleon must have taken to adjust to his environment or her environment. It takes forever. It's not instantaneous. Evolution takes a timeless lifespan. So we have to allow that. But yeah, shake our head in awe and wonder that, damn, these patterns from 0 to 10 literally control the rest of our lives.
Right. And you got to stick with it. Because it doesn't always feel good right away.
An ally or a coach, a sister, a friend, you have to have somebody on your side. Like that's why AA has a sponsor, and I love that model, the community support model, because you cannot do it alone and you have to stick through. Yes.
Yeah.
As parents, we can, as you speak about, we can sometimes view our children as our property, right? And or our mini-me's. Just if you wanted to speak at all about what's the impact of that if we're approaching parenthood from that perspective, as them as property or mini-me's, and what's a healthy way to view our children.
The most prominent, common, ubiquitous dysfunction in parents is that we think they are extensions of ourselves and they are ours. And this is the one big thing that conscious parenting completely, annihilates, busts up, because I teach parents to understand that children may have come through you, as Khalil Gibran said, but they don't belong to you. And it's so hard for us. We're like, damn it, I pay for everything. What do you mean they don't belong to me? But spiritually speaking, they are their own beings of their own making, and that's their right. They have one life in this body. How can you ask them to prescribe to your ideas and opinions and expectations? What a reduction of their intense spirit, right? But because we were raised as puppets, minions to our own parents' unconscious legacies, where they control the F out of us, we were like, I turned out okay. I ain't going to let my kid go loose. But when you touch upon your spiritual liberation through all this work, inner work, and you touch upon your sovereign spirit and how beautiful it is to make your own damn mistakes, not somebody else's mistakes. It's just, you want to free everyone in the world to make their own, like, you go fuck up on your own. There's great beauty in that versus, controlling them so they F up only according to our comfort level, right? What a tragedy to live your whole life tethered to the opinions and expectations and fantasies of others. Yet this is how we were raised. And our inner work is all about untethering, right? So we don't want our children to go through this enormous process and pressure to live up to our needs and expectations and then untether from that, right? When they're 45 or 65 and after having wasted their whole life living according to us. But again, it demands that parents let go of control. And control is the main principle of most parenting. I control my kid.
It's so easy to see something in yourself that you want to correct, and then you see your children and you're like, that you're viewing them as a mini you, and you're like, good, I'll correct it in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of going, you're your own person,
Yeah.
right? Look at them. They're their own canvas. Like they're not a projection of you, and you need to remind yourself that, look, that's not me, that is them, and I need to let them be the best version of themselves. But it's so easy to go like, I'll correct it in them. So then you can see, you almost think you're seeing you as the better you, but that's an unhealthy perspective.
Right.
It's so easy to go there.
Right. And there's, many parents would say, but she's so much like me. And I go, no, even the kid who's most likely like you is so vastly different than you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was just lucky that my daughter was nothing like me. So I was forced to learn this early.
Yeah.
But even if she was like me, it's a delusion to think that they are like you. Even that idea, even what I just said, she's nothing like me, comes from my fantasy that she should have been like me, right? I shouldn't even be looking to see, is she like me or not? But our ego is so big. We're like, is she like me? Does she look like me? Does she think like me? And then we base it on, no, she doesn't. But even the question is a narcissism,
Yes.
It comes from our desire to want familiarity, to want comfort, and to want control. The truth is, there's no being on earth that remotely has had your genetics the way it shows up in your body. Nobody has your temperament because you're unique. And therefore, your kid cannot even come close. And if we understood that, then we would strive to work hard to attune to them. You see, because we don't want to approach each child as a fundamentally unique sovereign blueprint of their own making, we want to interject, we allow ourselves to interject control, right? Because we don't want to see them as separate. But if we saw them as separate, then we would attune to them, we would connect, we would work very hard to go, who is this being? Who is this being right now? And moment by moment, try to connect and attune. But because we have this delusion that they are like us or should be like us, all we're doing is controlling them to become that version of us.
Yeah. Look at it like, part of my job, or a big part of it, is to try to understand you. Like to my child, like that's my job, is like, I want to understand you and help you understand yourself, right? In turn. Right. So, right.
So I always tell parents, when they'll say in their defense, well, I wasn't even going to say anything, but my kid asked me for my opinion. And I always say that's the bait. Just because they're asking doesn't mean that you give the answer. They're asking because they don't know how to listen for their own answer.
Oh, that's interesting.
And if you didn't have ego, we love when our kids ask us about our opinion.
Right. Yeah.
We all have this God complex inside us to kind of like, oh, let me help you, let me save you. Yeah. And it's such a dysfunction and disservice to our children, because when they ask us, Daddy, what do you think? You have to really resist giving your all-knowing answer and make them figure it out and let them sit with it, because you're training them to go within. And I always tell parents, you have to act a little bit like a bumbling fool around them to allow them to develop their own resilience. Like my mom and dad are not that smart. Let me figure this out. Versus acting the smart Alex that we are. And everyone is smarter than a kid, really, except if your kid is in 5th grade, apparently. There was that TV show. I'm not smarter than my 5th grader or something like that.
Yeah.
But young kids, we get to be smart. And we like that feeling. So we boss them around. But we cut them from their own sense of agency, intelligence, brilliance. And so you have to act like a fool. Like if your 4-year-old says, where did the sun go at night? You're like, you're right. Where did it go? Now, you'll say, but then my kid is really asking, when do I really tell them? It's not about the answer. It's about the wonder of not knowing. It's about staying there, and they have an ally in the not knowing. So imagine you're 4 years old and you're like, damn, where did the sun go? Like for them, it's a game of hide and seek. They're like in awe and mystery. Like, where did it go? And you're like, let's go look for it. Right? Now they're all in the present moment in an adventure, versus where did the sun go? You're like, well, the earth is round and it rotates and there's evolution. And now the angle of the sun of the earth has, only allowed the sun to reflect off it. And some bullshit scientific answer. The kid is not going to remember. The kid is going to think it's dumb. And wow, my dad knows everything, which is what you want.
And the mystery and the adventure is gone.
The mystery and the adventure in the present moment is missed. See? Because our ego wants to be the boss,
I'm going through that right now. I have a 4-year-old and I'm going through those questions. Daddy, how does this work? And I'm like answering his questions because I'm taking them as literal questions. And oftentimes he asks it 4 or 5 times and like, he's not listening. So, you know what, I'm going to change it because I've been in that pattern, but I'm changing it now. Right.
Well, if the questions are very existential or very big, you get into the mystery of it. But of course, if they ask you at the restaurant, where's the bathroom?
I'm like, let's
go to the bathroom.
No, there's a time and place.
Right. It's just about checking the ego, you see, of seeing like, what does my child really need right now?
Right.
Versus, my ego's need. So for example, if you have a 13-year-old daughter and she's crying because the boyfriend broke up with her, but you know that the boyfriend is a total loser moron, don't tell her that because you're right. Just connect with where they're at, right? So, or if your kid was procrastinating for a paper due tomorrow, and then of course they don't finish the paper, now they get a C grade and they're crying, be there for them in that connection versus saying, I told you so. I saw it coming. I could have told you, if you listen to me, you won't be in this problem. They don't need to hear your bossy superior righteousness. They want an ally who connects with them on their journey. You see, very different energetic connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think with my son, his birth, his coming into this existence and into my life, set into motion a series of experiences, internal experiences for me that cracked me wide open and, turbo boosted my healing journey. And from my perspective, my son saved my life. So just to speak to that, from your experience, your expertise, what role can our children play in our healing, in our evolution as parents?
Right. Well, if we allow it, they can crack us wide open and inspire us to do our own healing and rise up to our highest potential. But very few of us are open to it. But I agree with you. My daughter was my greatest awakener because she was nothing like me. So she didn't stroke my ego. And from that birthed this whole movement of conscious parenting. But I suffered in the beginning because it was my ego that was in resistance. Our children come to us to show us all the ways our egos are in resistance to the reality of the isness. And I always say, I hope you have a really quote unquote bad child, because if you have a good child, which there is no good child, but you just have a sweet child who gives up their sense of self to please you, your ego is just going to become a monster. You want to have the kid who doesn't fit into the mold and doesn't prescribe to your fantasies, because then you awaken. So again, our children, to me, are our greatest awakeners. There is no relationship like it because you cannot escape it. You cannot divorce it. You cannot blame the other, the mother-in-law or the father-in-law, because you are it. And and because you have to suffer forever with this relationship, you have only 2 choices: grow the F up or suffer disconnection and dysfunction. Now, which one are you going to do? And it's a beautiful, beautiful awakener, this journey of parenthood. It is by far the most profound thing, if you are open to it, that one can do, because you have to release that ego like in no other journey. There is no 50-50, in other journeys you can go, it's 50-50. In parenthood, it's kind of all at least for the first 10 years. So you have to take accountability. You have to look in the mirror, and therefore you can grow up like never before.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much.
Of course. You can come to me with any issues in the future. I'm happy to help and be of support, because teenagehood has not yet struck your home. So when it does,
Yeah.
you can call me.
Yeah. And thank you just, for everything you do, for all of your work for humanity. It's just such a service,
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell us maybe first, where people should go to learn more about what you're doing, what you're up to?
Sure. They can find me on Instagram under Dr. spelled out the full word, Shefali, or on my website, drshefali.com. And my books are The Conscious Parent. That's my most seminal book. But I have other beautiful books as well. Yeah, that one. That was my first one. Yeah. And, I have a coaching institute where I coach parents and non-parents to do this work on themselves and others. So it gives them passion and purpose. And then I have my annual summit coming up. If people want to meet me in person, they can come for it. It's in Atlanta in October. So yeah, I'd love for people to come to that and experience in person a live event where you do a lot of healing work and deconstruct what relationships. I cover all topics: relationships, sexuality, beauty, success, and parenting. So yeah, that's what's on the table right now.
And that's called Evolve, the annual.
Yeah, that's called Evolve. It's on my website, and yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Such an honor.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. And I'm so proud and so happy to meet you both. And I'm always here to support you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
This is From Trauma
to Triumph.